Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. I have a Righteous Fire build in Path of Exile 2 for you guys. It is going to be a good one. It is a build I think a lot of people will be playing pretty soon because it was a really powerful mechanic and I think I've figured out a lot of the issues with it. It is not exactly a Righteous Fire, it is more of a Righteous Flatulence. That's right. You basically expel toxic clouds throughout the screen. This is, I believe, in a level 80 map, but the level doesn't actually matter. The core damage comes from a pair of boots. It starts at low level, but you need to get a higher level version of the boots because the higher item level gives you a higher level skill. You need a skill that's at least level 17 to get 5 links. So it's not a 6 link, it's a 5 link. That's the most you can get for itemized skills. But this skill does damage based on the corpse's life, and it does a huge amount of damage. It's poison damage, and effectively it's chaining. And yes, you are not mistaken. I am pressing no buttons. I'm literally just walking through the map, and in a level 80 zone with Breach, basically every single monster dies, every single rare dies. It doesn't really matter. Nothing can really touch you. I have like 15,000 energy shield. Hey, there's a second Breach there. Why don't we just click on that one too? Yeah, why not? So the idea is that because you're doing damage that's based off of the corpse's health, there is no content that can pose a challenge to this build. The funny thing is that if you go to like a level 20 zone, you actually kill the monsters just as fast because you're using the monster corpses, they do damage, not like your skills directly. So if the monsters, like if this map, if the monsters had 10 times more health, as long as I can kill one, and I can, it'll basically chain to all the other corpses in the map, and they'll basically all die, and you'll never really have a real like clear speed problem with this build. It's actually not possible. So that's a pretty fun one. Now, I do want to inform you guys that this is actually a build that has been kind of they've tried to figure it out in the community for a while now. The best version of the build that I have found is Skadoosh's version of the build here. Let me just move aside. This is a really good version, and I learned a lot going through all the community members and all the community builds that tried to tackle how to best use the corpse suede boots, and I certainly learned the most from this build, so I did actually make a note of it in my build, because you might actually like something that Skadoosh does in his version of the build. His version of the build uses evasion a lot more. I basically don't use evasion at all, and there's a few other things he does. He does a more active playstyle. I think you don't really need to do that, and I'll go over all the different mechanics here. It's a very simple build to set up. It's super cost effective. You don't even need there's no 6 link. The damage is the corpse weight, and nothing else actually requires a 6 link. If you want the full written guide, make sure to check out the link on Mobalytics. All of my builds are there. Sometimes I might be like trying to theorycraft a build and I don't have it like published on Mobalytics, but all that means is when I figure it out, I'll have it published on Mobalytics. I know some of you guys have been really asking for this one, so it's there. It's in the description. It will always be there, and I'll try to update it the best that I can. And while playing this build is really simple, setting it up is a little bit complicated, so I am going to go through things, and it might go a little bit slower than normal. Just be prepared for that. The skill tree will have 2 different skill trees in it. It's not actually just a one of consistent build. Sorry, I had that tab up for a while. Sometimes it does that. So the dual spec weapon swap, you really utilize it in this build. So this is the passive tree on Mobalytics. The ones that are in red and like pink, they're kind of like your map clear setup. And the ones in green are the summon your minion setup. And we do have different skills and different auras used for each one of those. So we're going to get in game and try to explain everything. For the gear, I just have the mandatory stuff. Like, it's really good to have life and chaos damage on rings. It's a lot of chaos damage. But, you know, really the Ghost Wraith is kind of key because it allows you to actually have life rolls on your gear, which will scale your energy shield. Otherwise, you can't actually get like energy shield on your rings or your belt or a few other things. So it's just like a really, really good armor. You don't have to use a Ghost Wraith. The Ghost Wraith have the most energy shield, but you don't have to. You can use a chest piece with like Spirit, which will help your damage. Your weapon swap, you don't have to use a Trench Timber. You can use just the shield because the damage is enough. I did kill Zesh with this build actually very quickly, and my version is a bit scuffed because you actually need pretty high level on this build. So currently I'm level 89. I killed Zesh at level 88 or 87, I believe. It was unbelievably easy. I mean, you have like 8,000 energy shield, and with Grim Feast you double it. So there's nothing really crazy. Just to go over my gear, so this is the setup where I just run around the map and actually just chain stuff. So it's more important to have Spirit on that scepter, and you do not want the Rattling Scepter. So like the Rattling Scepter here, the one that has Skeleton Warriors, it's maybe not ideal for your other one, but that's just the highest minion skills that I have. But it's okay, it's not bad. But for your main setup, no Rattling Scepter, because you don't want to screw with your revive timer. It's really important that it doesn't matter what scepter you have, they're all pretty much useless. But not the one that gives you 2 skeletons, because you can't not use them. This is enabled by default. You can't disable the skill on the scepter. And again, minion skill levels are good, but the only minion skill that we use is Grim Feast with the main setup. Now, Grim Feast has crazy scaling on minion skill levels, so it is actually still good to have some minion skills on your main scepter. I just want to kind of point out the fact that it's better to have some Spirit on it. Like right now, I would like to drop my amulet because, well, +1 is not really that good. It's actually a crappy level 30 amulet. But I need the Spirit to actually use this character. You need about 310 Spirit. So if my scepter had a little bit more, I could actually have quite a bit of a stronger character. Plus skills on the amulet. The rings, I mean, you can just put rarity on them. Doesn't really matter. For the shield, you want block chance. Max resist is really good, but again, life is really good. Life is really good because you can convert that life into more energy shield. Normally a shield can't actually get that much energy shield, but getting more life stacking is really nice. It actually helps your ailment and stun thresholds a little bit also, because it uses the life that you would have had if you were not Chaos Inoculation, but we are Chaos Inoculation, which means that we have 1 life and we are immune to chaos damage, which, oh my god, the game is so nice to play. In terms of like ground effects, yes, there's a little bit of burning ground, but it's pretty much mostly chaos or corpse based. But we actually explode every single corpse. So this build it's not like immune, but it's almost immune to on-death effects, because you are blowing up every single corpse as you walk around them. So there's almost no on-death effects. The few that remain are chaos-based, so you're chaos inoculation. So basically, this is a build that you can get 20,000 energy shield. It clears without pressing buttons. The content cannot scale over the build. Again, you can never face content it can't clear because it uses the corpses to deal damage, and it's just crazy. So it is a wonderful build. All right, energy shield on gloves, belt, life is good because you're using Ghost Wraith, so it's just kind of whatever on that end. Corpse weight. So this is the item. You can get one with skill level 17 for the 5 link. You can also get one with skill level 18. I'm using 17 because this one has freeze threshold. I don't know if that's really all that valuable, but I might choose to put a different socketable in that one later on. I do play solo self-found, which is also why my gear is kind of crappy. But yes, so with this setup, what we're doing is just popping corpse after corpse after corpse, and if you want to kill the first target, you can just weapon swap and then weapon swap back, and now you have your poison clouds that are based off of the health on your minions. Now those clouds you can do actually over 1,000,000 DPS. This actually crushes the endgame bosses if you have a really good setup, but you need about level 93 to 95 to have like the perfect setup as I outlined it. It does help that Pathfinder gets a few extra skill points, 6 extra skill points, actually really nice because we have to path all the way here. The really important thing with dual spec is that you can't pass a dual socket with a dual spec. So with the second spec, so in green, so this is the one in red, this is the one in green, Okay, so weapon set 1, which is the clear setup. We want the curse passives. So we want like zone of control. I don't have it yet, right? The curse passives are really, really good. We want area. Area is really good. The other builds that I've seen with this, they say that the spell modifiers don't work. The spell damage modifiers don't work for the gas cloud, but the actual things that affect spells do work, because it is in fact a spell. Decompose spell. You can see it there. So actually, I did test that the area effect works, and area effect is huge for this build because it allows you to chain corpses off of one another in the map. It allows the corpses to kind of warp around corners. Dude, you can do like augury in this. It was a seepage, like the worst map in the game, basically. It's fine in this because the corpses chain around corners. Like the indoor maps aren't even that bad. Obviously, you still prefer outdoor maps because there's way more monsters, but yeah. So it's a real pleasure to play this build. Now, back to what I was saying with the jewel sockets. So we have to get here because with the second build, we want to focus on revive speed. And 25 revive speed here is extremely important. I would say that I don't really want to play the character without the revive speed. Now, you can just play with Poisonous Concoction. We'll go over that in a second to get this character to like the level 80s or so. It's one of the best builds in the game also. But that's the reason why we path here. So we go through the jewel socket in order to dual spec into minion revive. If we don't pass this jewel socket, we would have to like go around just super inefficient. And the other dual spec is here where we get minion life, higher minion life. We use the minions as corpses on the weapon swap. So the base damage is higher, so we can scale it up a little bit better. And all the revive speed. And a little bit more minion health there for a little bit more damage on the secondary swap. So that's kind of the idea of the build. I do have a different pathing than most people for this. I did actually scrutinize this significantly. I am confident this is the best pathing to actually make it effectively to this jewel socket. Okay, that is the big one. We don't get the chance to not destroy corpses. I've seen many versions of this build that gets these. They can help your single target damage because it effectively allows you to multi-use it on the same minions. And that is good. I don't disagree that is good, but this is bad because when you're in a map, it might actually trigger on a corpse and not destroy it, but it could be a corpse with an on-death effect. So even though it's a single target bossing DPS increase, for sure it is, I don't think it's that massive, but it actually makes you weaker against on-death effects, which is like the only way this build might possibly die. For the links on Decompose, area is the most important one. Comorbidity is +1 poison. So the poison duration is actually significant, but this is still a pretty good gem. When you trigger the cloud stays in the area, and effectively every like second or so it pulses a poison tick. So one cloud can actually stack several poisons. You don't need like, I think this build has 8 total poison stacks, and I'll explain how that works. So you don't need 8 clouds to put 8 poisons. You can do that with like, I don't know, 2, 3, I don't know exactly, but only a few. You don't need that many. Spell Echo does work. There's some argument to whether the area of effect works. I actually think that the area of effect might not work on this, but the fact that it casts twice is really, really good for clear. You might want to substitute this for a different gem for single target, but again, I killed one of the hardest bosses in the game, and it was pretty easy. Deadly Poison, so the hit damage is kind of like a hidden hit, so this is not 75% more damage, it's like 30% more damage, but again, that still makes it as one of the best gems. And yeah, the skill itself, if we hover over the skill, so poisons enemies as though dealing chaos damage equal to 38% of the corpse's maximum life. That is an enormous value. That is a huge amount of damage, and normally a target can be affected by 1 poison, so we have the support gem, so that puts it at 2 poisons. We also have stacking toxins for 3 poisons, and we have building toxins for 4 poisons total. However, Pathfinder has this thing where you double the number of poisons that a target can be affected at the same time. So we go from 4 poisons to 8. It basically makes Pathfinder the best Ascendancy for any poison-based build by a colossal margin. I actually think it's not very good that they designed it this way, because they made an effort that you should be able to play minions with multiple classes. They don't want an Ascendancy class that's pigeon-held on playing minions. Okay, I agree, but then we literally have a class in the game that is by far the best class at playing poison. So you have to play Pathfinder. There's no question about it. 6 extra skill points is really nice. This node is ridiculous. This is a poison prolif, which is ridiculous for clear speed. And I went with Poisonous Concoction, and most builds that play this setup go with Running Assault. Now, if you saw the gameplay part of the video, you would notice that I wasn't actually using any skills. So this passive is actually insanely strong, but this build in particular doesn't actually do anything other than walk around. So it's just not used. And the Poison Concoction is also not really used, but you can use it. So why would you use it? So if you have the minions, they go on revive timer. So for like 4 seconds, I can't use my minions as corpses anymore. If I'm going through a map fairly quickly, or maybe if there's like a bug, or maybe if my minions actually instantly died to an AoE right when I summoned them and I didn't actually walk a little bit, because you have to walk, like if I stand still, it doesn't trigger. You have to walk, see? If I dodge, it doesn't trigger, okay? If I use the shield charge, it does trigger. So you have to use shield charge or walk, okay, to actually trigger them. So you might not get a trigger, or you might be clearing a little bit too quickly. That's the only time that I use Poisonous Concoction. Now, one Poisonous Concoction will actually one-shot normal monsters in a level 80 map. It is actually really strong. So you can level with a Poisonous Concoction-based Pathfinder. It's currently one of the best builds in the game. So you can just level with that until you can put this build together. So that's basically the leveling build in a nutshell. Now, Poison Concoction is not used otherwise, even though it's really strong, because of this skill here. So Event Horizon is a large amount of chaos damage, and you lose 3% of life and energy shield when you use a chaos skill. Now, this means that in POE1, this would not interrupt your recharge, but in POE2, this does interrupt your recharge. So you really do not want to be using chaos skills very often. It'll make it so you do not regenerate energy shield like ever. So now you still get it from the Grim Feast, but otherwise it's pretty rough. Now, this is a huge amount of chaos damage, and it is the node before Spaghettification, which is an insane node. It's an unbelievably overpowered node. So there's no way we're not getting this. Okay, we're getting this. Okay, and yeah, that just means don't use chaos skills. So a few things to note, just so you guys are aware mechanically. We use Eye of Winter with Unleash, so 3 of them go off at the same time. With Withering Touch, so it doesn't normally deal chaos damage, but with Pure Chaos, gain 11% of damage as extra chaos. It does, and this also works on the Poison Cloud, so that's really good. It's 11% more damage, and because it works on Eye of Winter can wither with Withering Touch. Deceleration, 30% less projectile speed, makes the main projectile that starts splitting off everything go 30% slower. It basically means 50% more projectiles. It's actually insane. I tested with and without. This is like the best gem. And the persistence is not super mandatory, but you can check in the tooltip that the wither duration is 8 seconds, and if we take it off, it's 5.6. So it basically means that one Eye of Winter with Unleash will give full Wither, and if you're unfamiliar, Wither is a debuff, 5% increased chaos damage taken, and it stacks 10 times, so 50% more damage basically on the target. It's really, really good. You want to use that on bosses. On non-bosses, it doesn't matter because everything is just going to die. Even if the mobs have 10 times more health than level 80 map, they're still going to die at the exact same rate because they kill each other off chaining their own corpses. But against the boss, you should do that. Now, I wanted this to not be a chaos skill so it doesn't interrupt energy shield. That is very key. That's why we're using a cold skill. Okay. In terms of scaling, like I thought to not go Poisonous Concoction and try to get something else. Nothing really was as good as like a backup skill as Poisonous Concoction. The closest one was maybe Hex Blast, but even then it was a chaos skill. I had to use it like 2 or 3 times, and it was a bit more problematic. Also, even though poison can trigger off of physical hits, the damage calculation is on the hit. it doesn't happen a second time on the poison. So because we're stacking a lot of chaos damage and no physical damage, if we used a physical skill to trigger poisons, the chaos damage percentage on our passive tree will not apply to those poisons. I know that's like really weird, and it's going to be like a messing up with your mind, because that is different than POE1, but yes, that is different than in POE1. So with our build, if we want like a backup skill, it has to be poison, and we really don't want to use it very much because it interrupts our energy shield regeneration. The set 1, we have a lot of spirit because we have a lot of auras, so we use Blasphemy with Despair and Temp Chains. Temp Chains makes it so other effects on cursed enemies expire 25% slower. This is really nice. For one, the Wither stacks do not refresh. Like if you have 9 Wither stacks and then you apply another one, that one lasts an independent duration than the other 9. Doesn't refresh the whole stack. So it's pretty nice. Temp Chains makes it so you can run through a map and everything is slowed around you. And in POE2, for whatever reason, if you're always moving, the monsters like never hit you, which is why I'm pretty much never taking damage with this build. Heightened Curse and Ritualistic Curse for a little bit of AoE. We use Blink as another aura. It's really important because we don't want to dodge roll. You might get stuck because we're just a solo player. We don't have any minions. You might get stuck. You might get surrounded by monsters. So you need to Blink. And Blink is really important because you can do it easily when you're surrounded. And it's not a dodge roll. Dodge roll does not consume corpses. But if I blink and then keep running, the effect of the boots will actually keep triggering to kill the monsters around. Now, it is actually cast. Believe it or not, Blink has a cast time. It doesn't look like it, but I've noticed that it doesn't get... you can't get stunned during it. Like, it can't interrupt the cast, but it can trigger Energy Barrier. So Energy Barrier is, like, really good with Blink. Now you know, I guess, so that's why it's there. And Arcane Tempo to make the cast delay a little bit slower. We're using Withering Presence to help wither, mostly for clear. It's not a big deal. I would probably drop this if you don't have sufficient spirit for your clearing setup. And Herald of Plague is really good because it does another source of kind of proliferating the poisons, but it's also really good, not with clarity, with... with quality, because it has a chance to hinder. The base hinder in POE2 is 30% movement speed slow, so if they're like temp chains and they're taking like lots of damage, another on top of that 30% slow is huge. So you want Herald to kind of proliferate the poisons and also slow everything massively. Now, when you do the weapon swap, again, it's okay if you have Skeleton Warriors. I don't think it's bad or good. It's just okay. It doesn't matter if you have them or not. You're mainly utilizing the Brutes. The Brutes have the highest health of all minions. Mine have 31,000 life with the setup. And again, my minion nodes are only on this setup, so I don't have any minion health on the other setup. It's just this setup. It's the Weapon 2. So Weapon 2 I have +4 to minion skills because I need to have as much health on them as possible. It's still good to have spirits, so you can have a few more, but it's not as important. Now, because we want as many brutes as possible, we actually have to cut back on auras, so we cut back on Herald of Plague. Honestly, I can probably cut back on Withering Presence now that I think about it. So that's how you do that there. This is weapon set 1, weapon set 2. Does that let me have another brute? It doesn't. Okay, that's probably why I had that on. But yeah, that's the idea. You want to cut back on your stuff. So I actually cut back on the auras as well. I cut back on the blink. I try to cut back on as much as I can to get as many brutes as I can, because you're utilizing them with sacrifice that you don't want to have sacrifice on the first weapon set to kind of begin the trigger. This is also your boss damage. I also mentioned that my boss damage is really low on this character compared to what it can be. It's not low for like the game. I still beat the hardest bosses, but it can be a lot higher. That's because I just don't have enough levels, so I currently have like extra poisons and stuff that's not in my minion setup. So you typically want that in both builds. You want this in both builds. Again, if you can get to like level 92, 93, 94, this build will just be absolutely peaking, and the game should basically have absolutely no challenge for you. But the good thing is that it's just a really fun build to play. It's one of the best mapping experiences I've had. All the frustrations in POE2, they might fix them, they might address them, but at the current point in time, this build just like doesn't care. Like getting surrounded is not an issue because the more mobs there are, the faster they die. The crazy scaling doesn't matter because if they have more health, they just die at the same rate anyway because we use their own corpses to blow up the other monsters around them. We have a huge energy shield pool. We have absolutely no worry about one-shots. This build has no corpse conservation, so we have absolutely no problems with on-death effects because we destroy all the corpses as we walk by them. We actually don't care that much to do indoor maps because the monsters can chain around corners into different rooms. It's just like fun to play. Just fun to play. If you enjoyed Righteous Fire and Path of Exile 1, this is the build. Okay, this is it. This is Righteous Fire in POE2 as it currently stands. So give it a try. Again, if you want the written guide, maybe even bookmark this one because the setup is a little bit complicated. You can watch this video again. Why not, of course. But I did actually fill out all the sections on Mobalytics, so it should be in full written form as well. If you ever maybe have something mixed up, I'm sure you'll figure it out. Just go through that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.